Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. The Israeli cabinet has now approved the controversial plan to militarily seize Gaza City. Despite widespread international condemnation and some domestic opposition. In order to achieve this goal, the Israeli Defense Ministry earlier in the week has authorized for the call-up of about 60,000 military reservists. On Friday, the United Nations-backed Global Hunger Monitor, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, has officially confirmed what many people had been saying all along would be the consequence of the crippling Israeli-imposed blockade, resulting in the widespread starvation of the Palestinians. The United Nations-backed agency has now announced that famine has officially taken hold of the Gaza Strip, and unless urgent steps are now taken to allow humanitarian aid and food supplies into the Gaza Strip, there will be a dramatic escalation that we will witness of starvation-related deaths of the Palestinians. Israel, however, insists that there is no famine in Gaza. More than 62,000 Palestinians have been killed in this bruising war that Israel has fought with American fighter jets and American bombs. Even after 23 months of bloodletting in Gaza, the possibility that this war could come to an end does not even remotely appear on the horizon. Instead, Israel is trying to strike a deal with South Sudan to shift the bruised and battered Palestinian population of Gaza into another remote and unwelcoming war zone of South Sudan. Our next report gets you more details.
The once picturesque coastal enclave of Gaza, now reduced to a wasteland, is in the midst of a humanitarian catastrophe where starving, desperate children and adults, stripped of dignity, rummage through rubble for morsels of food when they're not braving live bullets, stun grenades and pepper spray at nearly every aid distribution site. The United Nations has condemned the United States and Israel-backed food distribution system, calling it an abomination and a death trap. But the relentless Israeli war machine marches on. On Wednesday, Israeli military called up 60,000 reservists, pressing ahead with its plan to seize Gaza City, the besieged enclave's largest city. The same day, Israeli military spokesperson said the military had taken the first steps of a planned operation to take over Gaza's biggest urban center.
In accordance with the directives of the political echelon and after the approval of the plans by the Chief of the General Staff, the IDF began the next phase of the campaign, Phase 2 of Operation Gideon's Chariots. We will deepen the damage to Hamas in Gaza City, a stronghold of governmental and military terror of the terrorist organization. We will deepen the damage to the terror infrastructure above and below the ground and cut the population's dependence on Hamas. We are not waiting. We have begun the preliminary operations and the initial stages of the attack on Gaza City, and IDF forces are already holding the outskirts of Gaza City.
The Israeli military assaults on Gaza City have continued despite international criticism of an operation which is likely to force the displacement of many more Palestinians. On Friday, Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, vowed to destroy Gaza City if Hamas did not agree to disarm, release all remaining hostages in the territory and end the war on Israel's terms. Hamas, now a battered and bruised guerrilla force, according to the Israeli estimates, had agreed on Monday to a proposal by Qatari and Egyptian mediators for a 60-day ceasefire, which according to Qatar would see the release of half of the remaining hostages in Gaza. But reportedly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected the proposal, demanding an end to the war in Gaza on terms acceptable to Israel. On Friday, after almost 2 years of war, famine was formally confirmed for the first time in parts of Gaza, with almost a quarter of the population facing starvation, according to the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification. The Global Hunger Monitor said that 514,000 people, nearly a quarter of Palestinians in Gaza, are experiencing famine, with the number due to rise to 641,000 by the end of September. What's worse, this famine, characterized as a moment of collective shame, could have been easily prevented.
In no doubt that this is irrefutable testimony. It is a famine. The Gaza famine. It is a famine that we could have prevented if we had been allowed. Yet food stacks up at borders because of systematic obstruction by Israel. It is a famine within a few hundred meters of food in a fertile land. It is a famine that hits the most vulnerable first, each with a name, each with a story, that strips people of dignity before it strips them of life. It is a famine in 2025, a 21st century famine, watched over by drones and the most advanced military technology in history. It is a famine openly promoted by some Israeli leaders as a weapon of war. It is a famine on all of our watch. Everyone owns this. The Gaza famine is the world's famine. It is a famine that asks, but what did you do? A famine that will and must haunt us all.
While international actors watch in deafening silence, the horrors unfolding in the once picturesque coastal enclave, the hungry, desperate, frequently displaced and callously forgotten Gazans are barely clinging to a life of dignity.
For those who expected the Russia-Ukraine war would slowly begin to draw down after the summit meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and the extraordinary multilateral meeting of the European leaders with Donald Trump, they're in for a surprise. If anything, the temperature of the war along the front lines has dramatically gone up. The Russian president has stuck to his demand that Ukraine should completely withdraw from the parts of Donbas that it still controls, renounce its ambitions to join the NATO military lines, remain neutral and keep the Western troops out of the Ukrainian territory. In return, Moscow would freeze the current front lines in Zaporizhia and Kherson. But the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has dismissed the idea of withdrawing from the internationally recognized Ukrainian land as part of a deal. And he said that the industrial Donbas region serves as a fortress that is holding back the Russian advances deeper into Ukraine. With this being the hard position that the two leaders have taken, the prospect that there could be a swift end to the Ukraine war at this moment looks very bleak. So what really is the situation on the ground? Our next report gets you more details.
This is not a frozen conflict. Between the 16th and 22nd of August, the Russian troops captured 9 settlements in the Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. The Russian troops launched 6 cluster strikes using precision weapons and unmanned aerial vehicles, hitting Ukraine's defense factories, energy facilities, oil refineries and ammunition depots. For the Ukrainians who were hoping that Donald Trump's diplomatic efforts would bring down the temperature of this war, there was no respite. Explosions echoed across the Kiev skyline as Russia launched a widespread air attack. Residents sought shelter in the capital's metro stations, bringing children and pets with them as the air raid sirens sounded. In Ukraine's northern region of Sumy, at least 14 people, including a family with 3 children, were wounded in an overnight Russian attack, as Russia launched 15 drones in an assault on the Oktyrka area. In the southern Ukrainian region of Odessa, Russia launched a massive drone strike, injuring 1 person and causing a large fire at a fuel and energy facility. Fire crews in protective suits tried to hose down the large fire. The administration of the Ismail district in the Odessa region said that the port infrastructure in the city was damaged, but Ukraine too is fighting back hard. According to the Ukrainian Defense Forces, its 5th separate heavy mechanized brigade recaptured much of the settlement of Tovste in the Donetsk region. The Ukrainian airborne assault units earlier drove the Russian troops out of the villages of Zoloty Kolodias and Petrivka. Ukraine also claims its drone units, in coordination with other forces, struck the Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery in Russia's Rostov region, causing multiple explosions, and it also launched long-range drone attacks targeting the Russian drone warehouses and logistics hubs in Donetsk, as well as the fuel depot in Russia's Voronezh region. But Ukraine's biggest attack this week came when it struck the Onecha oil pumping station in Russia's Bryansk region. Soon there were reports that the Ukrainians had successfully managed to strike the Druzhba oil pipeline facility, halting the delivery of crude oil to Hungary and Slovakia. Ukraine has specifically stepped up its attacks on Russia's energy infrastructure, targeting Russia's oil fields that it insists play a huge part in financing Kremlin's war. Oil and gas sales account for almost a quarter of Russia's total budget proceeds. On the 23rd of August, a day before the Ukrainian Independence Day, which is marked as the National Flag Day in Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky's message could be more clearer.
This flag is a goal and dream for many Ukrainians on temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. They keep the flag. They keep it because they know that we will not gift our land to an occupier. This flag symbolizes the dearest thing for hundreds of our warriors, men and women, from all over Ukraine who defend not just a specific direction of the front line, not just Vovchansk or Dobropilya, but entire Ukraine. Congratulations on Flag Day, dear Ukrainians. Glory to Ukraine.
The Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, a close ally of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, has spelt out the expectations that Ukraine should realistically have over its security guarantees. The Russian position is, not only should Ukraine not be a part of the NATO military alliance, but it should not have any foreign forces stationed on its soil either.
They'll come to an agreement that there shouldn't be an army there, and there shouldn't be any weapons there, or something else, slowly, by hook or by crook, and the army will be, and it will arm itself. So what? Should the Americans supply patriots there? Are the Russians going to start a war against America? Therefore, we must be realistic. So by hook or by crook, everything will take shape, not the way we might want. Therefore, yes, we will insist alongside the Russians that this would not happen, that they should not be an aggressive country, that this should not be a springboard for attacking us in the future. But the situation may be such that
Donald Trump insists his diplomacy is driven by one guiding principle. He wants to end the bloodbath in Ukraine and has repeatedly said that the war is not winnable for Kiev. After meeting with Vladimir Putin and other European leaders, Trump has been working the phone to try and get Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky to negotiate face-to-face, either with him being at the table in a trilateral summit, or preferably, as he is now saying, without him, so that Russia and Ukraine can agree on terms on their own, but his patience is wearing thin. A week after meeting Putin in Alaska, the Russia-Ukraine war has dramatically intensified. No ceasefire was agreed upon, as Russia feels it is winning the war and it can capture more territory until a peace deal is reached. So Donald Trump is again talking of sanctions.
Just sent a picture from somebody that wants to be there very badly. He's been very respectful of me and of our country, but not so respectful of others. But I'm going to sign this for him, but I was sent one, and I thought you'd all like to see it. That's a man named Vladimir Putin, who I believe will be coming, depending on what happens. He may be coming and he may not depending on what happens. We have a lot of things happening over the next couple of weeks. But I thought it was a nice picture of him. Okay of me, but nice of him. So that was very nice that it was sent to me. Okay? Well, then I'm going to make a decision as to what we do. And it's going to be a very important decision. And that's whether or not it's massive sanctions or massive tariffs or both. Or do we do nothing and say it's your fight?
So, the question is this: if Ukraine war continues to drag on, will Donald Trump now really impose more sanctions on Russia?
At least 50 worshippers were killed and around 60 others were abducted when armed bandits stormed a mosque in the northwestern state of Katsina in Nigeria on the 19th of August. According to eyewitness accounts, armed assailants arrived on motorcycles, opening fire inside the mosque before moving through the village, setting homes ablaze. In what has been described as a series of brutal attacks on the remote community of Unguwan Mantav in Malumfashi local government area, at least about 30 people were shot dead and 20 others were burnt alive. Though no one has immediately claimed responsibility, such attacks have become rather common in Nigeria's northwestern and north-central regions, where local herders and farmers often clash over limited access to land and water. Our next report gets you more details.
In northwest and central Nigeria, armed gangs locally infamous as bandits have for years preyed on rural communities. Raiding villages, kidnapping residents for ransom and burning homes after looting them is their modus operandi. With Nigerian security forces proving unsuccessful in defeating them militarily, authorities at the state, local and federal levels have at times opted for peace deals, including in the Katsina state. However, the local government of Malumfashi, where the Tuesday carnage took place, had not signed any truce agreement. Tragedy struck early on Tuesday as Muslim worshippers gathered for Fajr, the dawn prayer. Bandits stormed the mosque located in the village of Unguwan Mantav, killing at least 50 worshippers. Before security forces arrived at the scene, several homes were also set ablaze, and survivors recounted harrowing tales of women and girls being dragged away by the assailants. Our correspondent Luisa Olani sent us this ground report in the immediate aftermath of the incident.
Death toll rises as families of deadly Tuesday mosque attack in Katsina State mourns their loved ones, with many still missing. The assaults carried out by armed gunmen occurred during dawn prayers on Tuesday. Local officials report dozens of worshippers were shot dead and many others burned alive as the attackers touched homes. Katsina State Police intercepted the assailant, preventing further attacks on nearby villages, but the gunmen remain at large. Authorities suggest this may be a reprisal for a recent vigilante ambush on bandits. The unfortunate attacks continues as security operatives battle various armed groups across the country. Many are still reported missing.
Local government labelled it as a reprisal attack, a retaliation for the ambush and killing of a number of bandits by the local residents 2 days earlier. Though police and military personnel have been deployed to nab the bandits, the attackers remain at large. Reportedly, gunmen often hide among the crops in farms during the rainy season to carry out assaults on communities. Struck with the tragedy, the residents of Unguwan Mantav have been mourning and tending to the wounded. As per tradition, grieving families in the aftermath of the Tuesday bloodshed sat outside their homes, accepting condolences from visitors. Nigeria's vast northwest region borders Niger, and criminal gangs crisscross between the two countries, making it difficult for the security forces to capture them. Katsina and neighboring state Zamfara have been hit the hardest by banditry in the region. losing the maximum number of lives and witnessing the most displacement as a direct consequence of the problem. At a time when banditry is on the rise in Katsina state, Tuesday's tragedy is yet another grim reminder of this security challenge being faced by President Bola Tinubu's government.
At least 18 people, including 12 police officers, were killed and dozens more were injured in two separate attacks that were blamed on dissident guerrilla groups in Colombia on the 21st of August. The latest deadly attacks, which struck the southwestern city of Cali and Coca in the north, pose some fresh challenges to Colombia's fragile peace processes ahead of elections next year. Though the Latin American nation has enjoyed years of relative calm, left-wing guerrillas, right-wing paramilitaries and murderous drug cartels still maintain dominance over pockets of the embattled region. There's been a recent surge in violence which experts say is indicative of the armed groups regaining strength and their ability to carry out such coordinated and complex attacks. Our next report explores.
The Republic of Colombia was jolted out of its slumber on Thursday afternoon. At around 3 p.m. local time, a cargo truck loaded with explosives was detonated on a bustling street near a military aviation school in southwestern city of Cali, killing 6 people and wounding more than 60 others. As panic-stricken people fled the scene of explosion amid the sound of alarms and screams, vehicles were set on fire, homes were destroyed and injured. People writhed in pain on the ground.
Well, it was around 3 in the afternoon. We were walking home from Dollar City, and suddenly there was a loud explosion and the shockwave knocked us all to the ground. We went to see if we could help the citizens, but unfortunately many were affected and many died.
The Colombian police said that the target of the bombing was Marco Fidel Suarez Military Aviation School, vowing to capture those responsible for the deadly bomb attack on the airbase. The mayor of Cali, Alejandro Eder, ordered martial law for the country's third most populous city, besides calling on the public to report information about the incident for a reward of $10,000 US.
A few minutes ago, an explosive device detonated in a truck on the outskirts of the Cali airbase, leaving several dead and several wounded. I have already spoken with the Cali police commander and ordered him to secure all entrances to the city immediately. We are also going to restrict traffic or the transit of trucks weighing 4 tons or more from 7 p.m. today until 4 a.m. tomorrow, until further notice. We will see if this is extended. Let the public know that we are working from City Hall with the public force, the police, the army, and the Air Force to protect our city and find those responsible, and we will capture them.
The Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, blamed the lethal bomb attack on the Central General Staff, or EMC guerrilla group, led by warlord Ivan Mordisco. The rebel group broke away from the now-defunct Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC, after it agreed to lay down arms for a historic peace deal in 2016.
Y lo sucedido en Cali nos muestra el paso.
What happened in Cali shows us the transformation of what has been called Ivan Mordisco's dissidence into a terrorist act. Let me explain myself. It is not the same thing to engage in combat, where both groups are armed, as it is to kill unarmed civilians. What happened in Cali is an act that spreads panic among the civilian population, killing them systematically, because it is the second time this has happened during my administration. There have been a high number of civilians killed systematically.
Earlier on Thursday, in a rural area outside the northwestern city of Medellin, Guerrillas from another breakaway FARC group, armed with rifles and a drone, shot down a police helicopter overseeing the eradication of coca leaf crops, which are used to produce cocaine. Reportedly, the attack, in which 12 police officers were killed and 3 others wounded, was the work of a faction that split from EMC, led by a commander under the alias of Calarca.
In the early hours of the morning, when we heard the news, we had reports of 4 uniformed officers killed. Now the number is 11.
Ya el número está en 11. Este es el primer ataque de un dron.
This is the first drone attack we have heard of in Antioquia. Emboldened criminals, rich, sporting brand new uniforms and state-of-the-art weaponry.
Ricos estrenando uniforme y armamento de última tecnología.
In an alarming trend, the drone attacks have become increasingly common in recent years in Colombia, with as many as 115 recorded last year, most of them carried out by illegal armed groups. Colombians dread the return to the violence of 1980s and 1990s, when cartel attacks, guerrilla violence, and political assassinations were commonplace. For President Gustavo Petro, who had campaigned on a promise to bring total peace to Colombia, the latest attacks are yet another reminder that his conciliatory approach to armed groups hasn't quite yielded desired results.
And with that is the wrap on this edition of World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.